I was thinking about something earlier today. I want to ask your point of view
Yeah.
on it because I think that you'll have some insights on this. I was outside today. Today is like the beginning of October, so I
Yes.
was out there working on putting the Halloween decorations on the house. And I started thinking about like at first I was thinking to myself, man, it's kind of a bummer because I like to put on Halloween music and like soundtracks and things when I put work on the house. It's kind of a bummer that Afterlife didn't have like Ghostbusters Afterlife didn't have a soundtrack album. Like it had an orchestral,
Yeah. A
score
score.
album,
Yeah.
right? But it didn't have like a soundtrack album. Like Ghostbusters 1 has one and Ghostbusters 2 has one, but Ghostbusters Afterlife and even Ghostbusters The Answer to the Call has one,
Yeah.
but that movie did not. And I started thinking about it and I was like, man, it's kind of a bummer that it didn't have that. And then I stopped and I was like, maybe it's not a bummer. It's maybe we're kind of like beyond and past the soundtrack album. Cause I remember having this conversation with people when the movie came out who were like, yeah, we should have got a soundtrack. Like, why didn't we get one? And I started thinking about it today. I was like, well, why do we need one? Right? Like what would have been on it? And then I started thinking about the other Ghostbusters soundtracks. And I was like, okay, what's really on them that anyone really attributes to or thinks about as being related to the movie as like a key song?
Man.
Like
it's
like the first one has
like,
an Air Supply track that, has like 2 seconds in the movie.
The first one I think is, I feel like every time I come on here, I say something that some portion of the fandom is going to think is blasphemous, but it's fine. I'm that guy.
It's okay. I set you up for that because I said we didn't need a soundtrack. Some people right now are literally clawing their eyes out.
I think with that first one, and again, this is all relative to like, and this is not a hit on anybody, but like, how old are you? What did it mean to you when it came out?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. For me, the only songs other than like the theme song and obviously like the score that really stuck with me on that are like, obviously the Busboys song when they head to the hotel, because it's like in the movie, and then Magic for when the containment unit explodes.
And let's be I'm going to be honest. I said the same thing, but I will say this. Too. I don't. And Saving the Day isn't available when you try to listen to it on Spotify, right? I think isn't that one of the things? I don't remember. I can't remember if like that's. Oh, maybe that's just an Instagram when you try and add it to the background. I think Saving the Day doesn't exist. You have to go find some weird cover by some industrial music artist, and that's why I put that behind all the Extraplasm stories on Instagram. But like, yeah, like I think the same thing. But then I start thinking about even those songs, and when you get like no offense to Mick Smiley, right? But like. Most of Magic is not a good song that I want to listen to.
Dude, so
I only want the parts like doom 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 doom.
I used to be so confused when I was a kid and I would listen to the soundtrack because I had it on the tape or even when I had the CD, and it would get to like, oh, Magic is next, and then it would start playing and I'd be like I literally for the longest time would just be annoyed and then like skip that track because I thought
right.
that we had gotten like, have you ever listened to a song and like you hear one version of the song and it's this, and then you hear another version and maybe that first version was the remix or the second version was the remix and that is the one that is like iconic and everybody knows it, and then you hear the first one and it's like you can tell it's the same song but it sounds nothing like, or it sounds like so different from the one that everybody knows. I thought that like we must have gotten some sort of remix or original version of it in the movie. And then when they made the soundtrack, for some reason, they, in the contract or the licensing agreement or whatever, they had to put the original version of the song on there. And I was just like, this is dumb. I like the one in the movie better.
But it's really just because the song is like so damn long.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't realize until honestly like an embarrassing amount of time later, like, oh, it's the same song, it's just like there's an abrupt change.
Right. And it's like, and I like the Thompson Twins song that's on that soundtrack, but like I don't associate that song with the movie. It's like it happens like, in the background of a scene, but like I don't think of it as being
only those couple of songs where it's like a prominent part of a prominent scene that you're like, oh yeah, this is from Ghostbusters. Like it's a Ghostbusters song. And even with like, like with Ghostbusters 2, I generally speaking like that soundtrack a lot more. Like that appeals to me a lot more. And like, obviously you have like On Our Own and you have We're Back. And then you have like Run DMC doing the theme song and all that kind of stuff. But even then, it's like there's stuff on there that, even though generally speaking, I'm like, if you told me you have to sit down and listen to one of these from start to finish, I'd rather listen to the Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack. There's songs on that one where it's just like, this was in the movie? Was this in the movie?
Like there's an Elton John song on there.
Exactly.
Like
I'm just like,
what
I don't remember this at all. And then when you talk about like Answer the Call, something that I kind of like, to me, and this,
be careful.
Like,
be careful. You're stepping in the minefield.
We're not even talking about the movie. This has zero to do with the movie. I think something I've always thought, and I know I'm in the minority here, because one of the things I love doing, especially around this time of year, is just going on YouTube and looking up like Ghostbusters cover songs and searching by upload date. Because around this time is when musicians and bands come out of the woodwork and they're just like, for Halloween, we covered Ghostbusters. And some of them are pretty good. Like there's, I forget his name, Rob something. I forgot his name, but I'll have to look it up. But he put out like this epic version of the Ghostbusters theme song, and I've been listening to it nonstop, and it just gets me in. Like, to me, it's like the difference between like what normal people hear when they hear the Ghostbusters theme song, and it's just like the song as is, and then it's like what John hears when he hears the Ghostbusters theme song, and it's like dun 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 dun. I love it so much. I would love if at some point they just like put out 2 albums, and one was like the album of like music from and inspired by the movie, and then another album that was just a collection of musical artists doing covers of the theme song. Like one of the things that I kind of loved about the Answer the Call soundtrack is that every other song on it was a different person doing the theme song, and I was like, let's just have a whole album of that and then an album of the other stuff. I do think that like in terms of like the Answer the Call soundtrack, other than like 1 or 2 tracks, felt a little try hard to me, because like you had stuff that was like what was it, Never Saw It Coming, and I was like, oh, I like this. Like this, to me, it's again blasphemy time. I'm not even saying it's as good as, or I like it just as much as On Our Own, but it feels like the On Our Own of that soundtrack. Like it's a good song. It's catchy. It's easy to listen to. It gets stuck in your head. It's well done. But then you have that other song. I think it's from like one of the One Direction guys or something, where he's like, "Who you gonna call? Gonna call?" And I'm like, are we really trying to turn this into like the Ghostbusters catchphrase into like a love song when there's not even like a love story in the movie?
You're hitting on, for me though, like why I decided after working outside for a few hours that we don't really need a soundtrack, because like my concern is that it goes one of 2 ways. Either A, you are trying to like, and this is to be real, like why Afterlife didn't need a soundtrack. Afterlife didn't bring out like any new artists to do anything new at all.
I will say that
like, let's use existing songs.
I think it made complete sense that Afterlife did not have a pop music soundtrack, because it wouldn't have made sense. Like the nice thing about both the original film soundtrack, Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack, Answer the Call, and even just like looking at other movies, like the Spider-Man soundtracks are some of my favorite films. Like the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans are some of my favorite film soundtracks ever. Like the Spider-Man 2 soundtrack is one of my favorite albums of all time. Like that collection of music is brilliant. And that is before you even get into like, oh, and this is why it makes sense to put on like a Spider-Man soundtrack. And I think that works because Spider-Man, like, I don't know how to say it, but it's like when you have a family that's just like stuck in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't feel like there's as many opportunities to like, let's put a pop song in this, you know, like it's going to sound weird to just like have, as Trevor's like looking around in the dark to see what's like in the barn, and then you just hear like, I don't know, Taylor Swift in the background or something. It's like, why? What is this? But it might make sense if now we're in Firehouse and there's a scene where like the kids are going to school and their mom is just like, you better finish your homework if you want to go on calls with the guys later tonight, or I don't know, whatever the story is, right? And it's just like this, almost like a montage of like, eat your food, do your homework. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do the laundry? Okay, fine. You can suit up and go with the guys. And then it's like, I could totally imagine as all of that quickness is happening, it makes sense to put like a fun pop song behind it, you know?
Yeah. Yep. I hear you. Like, and that's, I think that part of the worry I have is about, injecting songs into things that don't need it.
Yeah.
Right. And like
It's
sort of
like
putting things in there that, right. It's like, it's about balancing it out. And I think it's weird, but like, this is the other side of this is I feel like that, I don't know. I'm trying to think about what movies actually have had like compelling soundtracks. Like in the last 5 years, even where it's like, yeah, and everybody needed to get that. And like, the only thing I come up with was like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. But even then, that's not like new soundtrack work for the most part. Most of it is like, here's an awesome mixtape that goes along with this, you know?
And again, that's the balance, because like, I think oftentimes nowadays when there's a soundtrack that doesn't have a purpose in the movie like that, and it's just like a soundtrack to have a soundtrack, it's like, oh, we have a scene where it makes sense to put a pop song. It's a sad moment, so we need a sad pop song or whatever that would make sense. Then the studio is going to give you a list of like, here are the artists we're promoting, right? Here's the artists that we want to like give them more spotlights, more time to shine, more opportunities. And then that starts to kind of hamstring you in like, okay, if this is all I have to choose from, then how am I going to build this movie's identity the way I want to? Whereas you might sit back, and if you're the director or the writer and you're planning this movie in your head and you're looking at the script, you might think like, oh man, this would be a perfect scene. Like, I could totally imagine this song playing here. And then you get to the point where you're having that discussion with the studio and they're like, you can use these people from our, recording label. And you're like, none of these songs hit the same. And at that point, it's just like, I'd rather like just use the score and control the emotional tone of everything perfectly than to use a pop star that's like, okay, this kind of works because it's also a sad song, but it's not the one I wanted. But then you have someone like James Gunn, who's like, the whole point of this is that the mixtape came from a certain era and Peter has had it and it means something because it's from his mom. But that is like the narrative conceit that allows James Gunn to sit back and be like, I want to put my favorite songs in this movie. And because it's an MCU movie and because I have like a good reputation and they can count on me to deliver something, that gives me some creative leeway to bargain and ask for that music to put in this movie that I want to make, so it can come out exactly the way I want it, because they know they'll be getting a better product if I can do that. And I think that I think that the people who can do that and the opportunities to do that are few and far between. If you can do it, I am like, go for it. Because to you, if you're the one making that movie and you know what music fits your vision and you can get it in the movie, it's going to make the movie better. But if you're just kind of like, oh, we should have a soundtrack, what music can we put here? And the studio's like, here's your list of 5 people that you can put in here. Don't do it just to do it.
Right. And that's like kind of what I'm getting at, is like, my concern is that I would worry about having that happen to a Ghostbusters soundtrack, because I mean, let's be very real. It kind of already has, right? Like, that's why that Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack is the way it is, because there are people on there because it was like, this will be a good hit. This will be a good artist to have in there.
And there's some stuff I'll that say it's like, oh, this really works here. Or, oh, we asked Bobby Brown to come up with a song for this or whatever. And it's like, this works. Right. This is what we were going for. But then, like you were saying, you have the stuff that's like, why is Elton John on here? And why is this song about cannibals? Like, what is this? Was this in the
movie? Yeah. I mean, and that's what's funny to me about like the if you had a soundtrack to Afterlife, it would have been like the Buzzcocks, right? Is that who it is who does that song? The Boredom song? I
remember. Yeah.
Right. It's like, it would be a punk band. It would be like for the scenes, the Ghostbusters theme song.
It would have to be something like Trevor's in the barn working on Ecto, and he found a boom box and an auxiliary cord and plugged his phone into it, and it's playing punk music or something. Or Lucky is working at the diner, and for a brief second we hear something that's playing off the radio, or like some kid whose iPod is plugged in. Or there's a moment where like Phoebe goes into Gruberson's office to ask him something and he's listening to something. It would like, how do you find those natural moments of like, what would it make sense to be playing here? But because you'd end up in that position of like, it's not significant enough to mean anything. And
yeah,
like the studio is going to give you, here's our list of musical acts you can use. It's not, I mean, I guess it could be a comedic moment, but it might not make sense if like, you walk into Gruberson's office and he's listening to like Doja Cat or something.
But I mean, like, even the film we got, right? Like the songs you could have pulled out of that to put on a soundtrack would have been like the original like Ghostbusters theme song. Yeah. The Buzzcocks Boredom, right? Because that's the song that plays when he's like, when Trevor's in the Ecto-1 doing the donuts. That's right. That now people are like, dude, don't sing guitar parts on your podcast. I'm sorry. And there was like the Pat Clap song, right, which you hear like a few moments of when they're going up to go to the mountain or whatever it is, right? That's when they play that when they're all in the car, and then it fades into like a creepy orchestral sting because it shows us the pit. Yeah. So it's like those would be your musical numbers, and then and then what? Maybe you'd have McKenna Grace's credits track. Yeah. Like that would have been the song that you'd be like, why is it there? Well, because she's an artist in the movie and they put it in the credits. But was it in the movie anywhere? Well, not really. But so why is it in there? Well, because she's in the movie. Right? Like,
I'm fine with that. Like I thought that was a great way to end the movie, and I thought that was a good song. And generally speaking, like you know. I'm okay with that kind of stuff where it's like this song wasn't in the movie, but it's the first one you hear during the end credits. And it kind of like fits the tone or the theme, or like, you know, a ghost never leaves a haunted house. It's like, oh, like Egon, you know, like, so that kind of stuff works. But it's definitely, I think Afterlife, it definitely didn't have enough to like do an album, but I could totally, I don't know. I don't have a physical copy of the soundtrack. Did they have a thing where it's like score, 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 and then the McKenna Grace song at the end?
No, I honestly don't know that song has been put out on an album of any kind, because even when, I could be wrong about that. I'm not a big like McKenna Grace fan of her music. Don't take that personally. Anybody out there who's like, what? I'm like, that's not really my genre, you know. But realistically, when that song came out on the soundtrack, it wasn't even something that had been like signed to a label. Like they added it late. It was like added as an afterthought. Like, hey, we could do this because she's got this song, and it was kind of thrown in as one of the last things to be added to the film. So at least that's my understanding of the situation.
I've seen soundtracks like that too, where it's like there might have been like one or two songs, like pop songs in the whole movie. And so it's like score, 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 score. And then like the last one or two tracks on the album are like the pop tracks that were in the movie.
Right. I was thinking about in the process of this, then we should move on and talk about more things like, Ectober things. But I was thinking about, the Batman, what is it? It's not Batman. It is Batman Forever. The Batman Forever soundtrack, and how huge when that came out. It was like U2's "Hold Me, Kill Me, Thrist Me," whatever the hell that's called. Hold me, thrill me, kiss me, kill me. Is that the name of that song? Yeah, it was like the big. Oh my God, there's a video for it, and it's got Batman in it, and it's airing on MTV over and over again, and it's a #1 song. And I was like, we don't do that anymore with movies. Like that cross promotion doesn't exist. And I was like, I don't know if we need it.
By Seal,
from Seal. Yeah. Yeah, like, but remember, that was like huge. Those two songs were being pushed so hard alongside that movie. And it would just be weird to me, I think, now if they did like the #1 hit from this summer's Ghostbusters movie. And you'd be like, okay,
100%.
Like, what? And it's not the Ghostbusters theme song? What the hell is it?